Hey guys, Cassie here. Welcome back to my channel, and today we are doing the Thank You Next book tag created by This Story Ain't Over. I will link her video down below so you can check out the original source if you'd like. There are 8 questions to this tag, so let's get started. Question number 1, name a book that you said thank you next to. In other words, you DNF'd it. Shiver. Oh my gosh, Shiver was the worst. This was one of those books that I had heard about, but I couldn't remember if I heard that it was good or bad, and I was using an audiobook service that kind of limits your options after a while. It's like after you read a few books, it'll let you choose whatever you want still, but the options are significantly limited. And Shiver was kind of the only one that was available that I had actually heard of, so I was like, I don't remember if I heard that this is good or bad, so I'll listen to it. Oh my gosh, you guys, Shiver is really bad. Like I said, at the time, my options were limited, so it was literally between finish reading this book or listening to this book, or just listen to nothing and just work and daydream or whatever. And I chose to listen to nothing because it was that bad. It just like, it starts off, I don't know, I don't even know where to start with that book. It's so many things are stupid about it. In fact, I might make a video about it sometime because I've heard, like, I don't think there are a ton of videos out there that are negative about Shiver. I tried to like look for some after I read it because I was like, oh, I want to see what other people say about how dumb this is. And I feel like the only ones I found were actually positive, which was really surprising to me. It's simultaneously bland and boring and also really melodramatic, and the characters are like soap opera levels of melodramatic at times. And I just very, very much did not enjoy that book, obviously, since I chose to just work in silence instead of finishing it. So question number 2 on the tag isn't really a question. It just says that you can answer the next few questions, the next 3 questions all together with the same book or with different books. So I'm gonna do different ones. So question number 3 is name a book that taught you love. Ow. Sneezing with a choker on is really not a good idea. So for that, I'm gonna say The One by Cass, which it kind of encompasses this whole series, but this is like the culmination, so I felt like it was a good representative. This book series, the reason I think this book taught me love, I mean, it's weird to say it taught me this because it's not like I didn't already know this. I read this very recently and I'm 25 years old, so I know this already, but I felt like this book showed kind of a different perspective of love and marriage being almost sort of, I mean, here's the thing. America, I believe, is in love with Maxon, and they have love for each other, but there also is sort of an element to this story of maybe choosing to marry someone and be with them because it is best for the good of the country. Because in this story, America is potentially going to become the queen of Aaliyah, and she's going to be marrying the prince, and that's going to be her new life. And so it explores love in a different way than just, do I have feelings for this boy? And instead, she's forced to also think about, you know, what would marrying this person mean, not just for me and for my life, but for the good of the country. Because she is really potentially a really great person to represent their nation at this point in time because of her class system and just the type of person she is. She is a very, this story reminds me a little bit of the Hunger Games in the sense that like Katniss is such a good person to lead the rebellion, and she does so even though she doesn't really want to. But it's kind of like her destiny. And so that's kind of explored a little bit in this series as well. I believe that America and Maxon do really love each other also, but it is explored the idea that maybe she should marry him anyway, even if she doesn't love him quite as much as she loved Aspen, because it would be better for the nation, and that might be more important than just her own personal feelings. So I felt like this book was a good answer for this question, because it didn't necessarily teach me something about love, because I've already thought of that before, but it showed a different kind of perception, I guess, of love, almost an arranged marriage kind of situation. Question number 4, name a book that, oh my gosh, I almost said learned you, that learned you patience. I am an author. Question number 4, name a book that taught you patience. For this, I have to say New Moon by Stephanie Meyer. Boy, oh boy, did this book teach me patience, and what it taught me is that I have none of it. There were so many times I wanted to stop reading this book because I was very, 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 very Team Edward. So this book was at times torture to read, because I was like, I can't enjoy this right now when I don't know if Edward's ever coming back. So at one point I actually asked my sister, because she had read this book before me. We were kind of reading it around the same time, but she finished it first. And I asked her, I was like, I don't really want you to spoil it, but I kind of want to know if Edward's gonna come back, because if he isn't gonna come back, then I don't want to read this anymore. I really feel like I'm wasting my time, because this is a hefty book, and this was long before I was a big reader, and I still am not a very fast reader, but at this time Twilight was kind of one of the first book series I really was into and read in its entirety. So this was like, I don't want to read this book anymore if he's not gonna come back at the end. And my sister was oh so very sneaky, because she told me he doesn't come back, but something happens that will make you happy and you will enjoy the ending of this book, I promise. And the reason she said that is because technically, if you've read this book, my husband is sneaking into the garage to lift some weights, and he's trying to be quiet, but it's not quiet enough, so we just have to wait. Anyway, technically, if you've read this book, you know that Alice comes back at the end, and then she and Bella go to Italy to get Edward. So, I mean, eventually Edward comes back to Forks, but technically it's really Alice who comes back. So my sister wasn't exactly lying. It was like a half-truth. It was very sneaky of her, and it was exactly what she should have said, because it didn't spoil the ending for me, but it made me know, okay, I just need to stick it out and keep reading this, and I will enjoy it, because man, halfway through this book, I was really getting worried that I was just wasting all of my time reading a book that was annoying me. Question number 5, name a book that taught you pain. For this, I definitely have to say The Chaos of Standing Still by Jessica Brody. Oh my gosh, that book was so heart-wrenching. I bawled my eyes out reading that book. There were parts of that book that I was actually reading out loud to my husband, and I was having to physically suppress my emotions so that I could even get the words out of my mouth. And then after that, when I was just reading it on my own and he wasn't around anymore, I was just openly weeping. It was such a sad book. Really dealt a lot with the concept of grief and loss, and it was very, and I would say it did teach me something about pain because I haven't experienced that kind of grief and loss before, of losing someone that close to you. So that isn't actually something that I personally know and have experienced. Like, love is something I've experienced, but this kind of pain I haven't experienced. So it really was like, just, it was a great book. You should certainly read it if you have a time where you're like okay with the idea of reading something that's gonna make you kind of sad, because I know sometimes I'm not in the mood for that, but if you are in the mood for something like an emotional journey, The Chaos of Standing Still is an amazing book. I wish I had a physical copy to show to you, but they didn't have it at my library, and I read it via my book subscription service, so I don't own a copy of it. Question number 6, name a book that you loved when you read it, but you don't love it so much anymore, but you still learned some other quality from it. For that, I would have to say Twilight, because as I said before, Twilight is one of the first books I ever read. I mean, I read a lot of books as a kid. I read, like, you know, little kid books, and I read Junie B. Jones a lot. I loved those books, and my dad read me the Boxcar Children books. But this was kind of one of the first series that I chose on my own, and I had never heard of it. It was actually already kind of popular when I started reading it, but I just didn't know that. I'd never heard of it before. I saw it at Walmart, and the cover intrigued me, and I thought it sounded interesting. I picked it up. It was the very first time that I ever fell absolutely in love with a book and like could not put it down and couldn't wait to get the next one. I remember when Breaking Dawn came out, that was the only book that I had to wait for, because by the time I read Twilight, it was far enough along that I think New Moon was probably already out, and Eclipse came out by the time I finished New Moon, so I didn't have to wait for anything. Until Breaking Dawn, I did have to wait a few months for that, and it came out right before we went on a big road trip to Utah, and I live in California, so it's a bit of a drive. And my parents bought me that book for the trip, and I read the entire car ride there, and like anytime I could that we had downtime while we were there, and the entire car ride back, I was reading that book. I couldn't put it down. So I love this series. I really still do love this series, actually, but I do recognize a lot more of its flaws than I did at the time when I was younger and when I had first read it. But I would say it just taught me about the love of reading, because after this, I did read more books, and I still kind of wasn't as much of a reader then until very recently, like a couple years ago. But I read the Hunger Games series, and there were a few books for sure. I read some Sarah Dessen books. That's when I kind of discovered her, was right after I finished this series. So it did introduce me into the world of reading and showed me what it's like to just be so obsessed with a book that you can't get enough of it. I mean, I was a huge Twilight fan. I was on the fan fiction boards. I was on the forums. I was submitting stories to My Life is Twilight. Do you remember that website, My Life is Awesome? I forgot about that website until just now. I have to look it up and see if it still exists, but they made a spin-off of it called My Life is Twilight, and it was great. Me and my friends dressed up for the midnight premiere of New Moon. I was Bella, of course. And yeah, it was a blast. I loved this series. I still do. It's still very close to my heart, but I see that it's like flawed, and that it's not the best book, and it's not the best writing, but I still think it's a really good story. Question number 7, name a book that you're currently talking to / have the hots for. The girl who created this tag said this is meant to be like just a book that's currently on your mind a lot. And I could say a lot of things for this because I have been reading a ton lately, so I've been thinking about a lot of different stories, but I'm gonna go ahead and say The Safest Lies by Megan Miranda. And the reason I picked this is because this book has been popping up in my mind a lot because I stumbled upon it recently. I'd never heard of it before. And I realized, first of all, I found a new author that I like because I really, really enjoyed it. So I'm gonna look up other things by Megan Miranda. But also it kind of reintroduced me to the idea that I really love mysteries and like suspense in a book. And a lot of times I tend to just gravitate towards romance, but it kind of reminded me like, oh yeah, there are other genres that I really enjoy. So I keep thinking about that story because it was unexpected how much I loved it because I'd never heard of it, so I wasn't really sure if it was going to be good or not. And it was one of those situations where my audiobook subscription made me, was limiting my choices again. So it was one of the limited choices, which kind of made me feel like it probably wasn't going to be very good. But then it was really good and I loved it. So I think that's why it kind of keeps coming to mind, is because it was so unexpected. I'm like, oh yeah, remember that book? That was a good one. Question number 8 is to name a book that helped you love yourself a little bit more. And for that, I have to say For the Love by Jen Hatmaker. This is an absolutely fantastic book. Fantastic? Did I say that right? For some reason I felt like I said that wrong, but I think I said it right, so now I just sound crazy. Anyway, this is a book about a Christian woman named Jen Hatmaker, obviously. And it's a nonfiction book about her life and kind of the fact that she grew up always being a love earner and someone who feels like she has to do something to earn love. And this was just her journey towards really discovering the power of God's grace and his unconditional love for us and what that means, and that we don't have to earn it. And that was something that at the time that I discovered this book, that was something I was really, really struggling with. And this book, along with the women's conference I went to where I got this book from, completely, literally changed my life forever. Like I am a different person now still. This was like, I don't know how long ago this was, like 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm still very, very strongly affected by the message in this book because I was a love earner too. And I was a perfectionist, definitely. And I was not very forgiving of myself and felt like if I did things wrong or didn't do the right things all the time, that God was disappointed in me. And this book and the conference as well, but this book is really good. It just totally changed my perspective completely. And I'm not really like that anymore. I mean, I guess I still struggle with that sometimes, but honestly, I really don't that much. Anytime thoughts like that pop up, I just immediately remember the message of this book and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to feel that way, never mind. And it's better now. So if anyone out there is struggling with that idea of just perfectionism and feeling like you have to earn love and grace and that you always have to be doing something or being a certain way to be worthy and accepted, you should absolutely read this book. It is amazing. It will change your life completely. And that is it for this tag. The next question is just to tag some people, which I'm gonna do down below in the comments. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you wanna see more from me in the future, subscribe below. I post new videos every Tuesday and Thursday. Also, don't forget to check out the original video down below. And thank you again to its creator for all of the awesome questions. And that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see y'all next time and have a great day.